Hello and welcome to Computer Séance, a podcast featuring spirited discussion about AI and popular culture. I'm Tracy.
I'm Justin.
I'm Ben.
Each episode, we take a seat at the table to conjure the spirits of AI past, present, and future, trying to find the meaning in the technological wonders imagined within popular fictions. All ideas presented in this podcast are understood to be the presenter's own. They do not reflect the thoughts, ideas, opinions, or positions of our employers, their programs, or its representatives. Justin, what have you got for us today?
For this episode, I've asked you to watch the 2019 dystopian thriller I Am Mother, written by Michael Lloyd Green and Grant Spitore, who also directed the film. Let's set the scene for our listeners. In the not-so-distant future, humanity has been wiped out by an extinction event. Deep inside a bunker, a robot known only as Mother, voiced by Rose Byrne, nurtures a single human embryo until it becomes a teenage girl called Daughter. She is educated, protected, and prepped for what's billed as a mission of hope to revive Earth. When a mysterious interwoman, Hilary Swank, suddenly appears at the bunker, claiming the outside world is still alive and that Mother's story is a lie, can you give me 3 words to describe your experience of the film?
I think I would say very biblical, and I'm kind of missing a 3rd word there, so I'll let Ben jump in.
My 3 words are techno-empathic horror.
I like these words. I would just ask lesbian futurism to that, probably. A deep, deep lesbian futurism to that. I want to approach I Am Mother in 3 ways. One, which is a massive spoiler. So if you haven't seen the film, go and watch it before you listen on. First, I wanted to consider what the film tells us about the technologies of gender. 2, to approach care through the figure of a maternal AI. And finally, to consider this manifestation of AI, the extinctionist AI that rebuilds humanity in its vision, and our desires around constructed knowledge that destroys us. Let's summon those spirits. What did you guys notice about Mother and her environment?
Well, I loved her little embryo Keurig. You know, they have this like little embryo capsule that they then put in this little, slot that looks exactly like one of those little coffee capsules. And then out pops a baby. I couldn't read the timer in like 29 minutes. Is that it?
I think it's 24 hours, isn't it? I think it takes 1 day to gestate. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I hope they recycle the packaging.
Ben, what did you notice?
I think as an environment, it just feels so isolated and claustrophobic, doesn't it? Almost like we could be in space. It's very lonely, I think, dark.
The idea that it could be in space, I think that's really interesting because one of the things that occurs to me is like for an environment for raising children, there's no laughing, there's no other noise, no commotion like sound. Yeah.
Yeah, it really reminded me of this idea that it takes a village. Right? It takes a village to raise a child, or, is one relationship enough for someone to learn how to grow up? It seems very limiting to try and raise somebody one-on-one, especially because there is the sense of Mother trying to raise a human to be a good human. And I just wonder whether that even makes sense in a society of 2, or whether that's even possible.
And what looks like the only warmth in the environment is coming from these little heater pads attached to Mother. Like they light up when she holds the baby or strokes the baby's head with these little heat pads. There's something perverse about that as well.
Perverse. Why do you think that's perverse, given that the world we live in now is just iPhones, Samsung Galaxies, iPads, and laptops?
Which I also think is perverse.
But it's perverse to a kind of like cogent level of our current experience. So one of the things I think is interesting is that, there's this embryonic darkness, this kind of like space age metallic womb that's happening, but actually it begins to sort of comment on the ways in which we live in a digital environment already, a kind of like sealed off solo space. Let's not forget that this became popular during COVID lockdowns, and everyone was watching this in their own sealed bubbles. All we were doing was interacting through things like YouTube, which we see Daughter learning through. She's able to access the archive of the past through digital media. We see her watching news and various comedy shows. It's interesting to think the author and director are commenting on our current ways of living. But what else did you notice that she was learning? What kind of things did she have to explore for her own body and her own mind?
I'm sort of surmising that the path to destruction that sort of is happening in the world and that Mother's responding to is maybe the one that we're currently on, right? And Mother wants to restart in a completely new way because of the way the world is going and humans are acting. And I think there's a tell for me in the choice of philosophers that they mention in the lessons. I can't remember who it is, but there's a long list of Western male philosophers who are not very recent, right? But I was like, this is a funny choice.
You don't feel that every human has intrinsic value and an equal right to life and happiness?
I did last month when we were teaching Kant.
And so it seemed to me that, Mother is taking through a very particular set of selections of culture and philosophy and ideas, a whole set of kind of problematic Western assumptions into her design project.
I mean, the first thing is she learns what Mother thinks is important to learn. So she also learns really practical skills, how to repair things, how to perform surgery, basically everything she needs to know to maintain the environment that she'll be left to maintain. And also dance, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, I think that daughter is becoming 16 at the point when Hilary Swank arrives to the bunker, right? At this point, she's already learned advanced surgical skills and like understands complete aspects of physics and kind of mechanics, right? Gendered nod of, and she's pretty and graceful too.
It's an interesting selection of things, though, because I think my reading of Mother is, you have to think what Mother's learning too, right? So the teacher is learning all the time. And if you make that sort of selection of survival skills, physics, so on, but also ballet, like I can imagine Mother's robotics, right? There's something where that makes sense. Like if I'm Mother and I'm learning about something, this is something as the Mother could empathize with and learn.
I was wondering if Mother was like, oh, here's something you should learn that I can't do, but you can because you have a human body. At least I thought it was interesting that they focus on it, because in robotics, there's a lot right now about the lack of smoothness in their movements. Like the jerkiness is something that we really struggle to get rid of in robotics. And a human body can move with such fluidity. And they show her doing all of these little pirouettes. And then other scenes when Mother's trying to race down the hallway to stop her from doing something, she's clumping around on those weird platform metallic heels that she wears. Mother, I don't know if you noticed that her feet are like up on a platform, but it's clear that she's like this hunk of metal that's very heavy, lumbering down the hallway. And then you have this very light figure of the dancer doing pirouettes.
That's nice. Yeah, I think I sort of come between where you two both took your responses to learning ballet, and that I agree with Ben that ballet as a codified technique of expressive body movements is something that could be programmed in, because you could take Vaganova technique, you could take one of the ballet techniques, Cicchetti, whatever, and put it into a system so they know that this is the sequence of 8 counts that needs to progress to get you to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And it is very formulaic in that way. But this expressive capacity of the body is the tension that we're allowed to have, right? That she is somehow, because of her human body, daughter is able to move in the world more capably as a human. Mother can perceive and surveil the world quite adroitly, but the daughter can move in the world more carefully and cautiously.
You can imagine it as something where Mother would take pleasure in daughter's learning.
Interesting. If Mother takes pleasure in her learning, is that?
In the sense of, daughter here is daughter surpassing Mother in something, right?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. We sort of get that, don't we? That when daughter discovers that there are other daughters in the past and they had failed exams, and the kind of desire for Mother to enact this kind of ultimate compliance check of, will you go with another human or will you stay with me and another spoiler, future brother? Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. I guess in some ways we have to then decide, is Mother's programming clicking along happily because it is hitting protocol points that are in a kind of project management timeline that have been outset well in advance for development of a human complying in these ways? Or is there some sort of sense of conscience that is able to kind of feel with her the pride and the joy of having mastered a skill or acquired knowledge?
Yeah, I don't think that mother can feel. So I feel like whatever satisfaction is sort of like an anthropomorphization of what mother is doing. Like for me, maybe there's some sort of like technological version of a reward when something in her protocol exceeds whatever KPI they've given it. I don't know. But like mother is trying to raise daughter to want to take care of her family, you know, and to have the skills to be able to do that.
What else stood out to you in terms of the kind of design elements in this embryonic bunker world of Mother?
I think really reminds me of the film Aliens, I think it is. You know, like that singular human with an AI called Mother. You know, there's obvious nods toward a lot of sci-fi from the 1980s, I think, generally in the film.
So I was thinking about design in three ways in the film. There's sort of three kinds of designers going on. The design of the bunker, the means of surviving the apocalypse, which has presumably been done by some world governments at some point. And then there's Mother as a designer. There's the mother's designing of daughter going on. There's Mother's strategy. There's Mother's terraforming of the earth or whatever's going on at the end with all the industrial agriculture that's appearing. And then, of course, there's the design of the film, right? So there's the people who've made the film and their design choices and so on.
I had a lot of thoughts about this that also related to me thinking back to the two guys who wrote this film that features three women. When I think about why so much AI is feminized or maternalized, I think it's because of technology acceptance, actually. The feminine seems less dangerous, more trustworthy. They will have read the research on this, the same research at Apple when they created Siri or Amazon when they created Alexa. This kind of feminine voice is less scary.
From a cursory Google search, the physical performance of Mother the robot is a male actor. It's hard to differentiate between what the filmmakers are doing versus like what's happening in universe. But like it's a very male technological design setup and very male kind of strategic design going on. And I think that's quite interesting in the way that, you know, Mother is appearing vulnerable, like deliberately when she's not. And she's also appearing female when, you know, of course, this is kind of an act, right? This is a character. And so there's a couple of tells for me. One is the thing about the philosophers that I mentioned, but another is the bodily movements, which comes back to the ballet question.
I read something recently that was about the fact that Mother's facial expressions, those two little lights that make a smile or not on her face, those are being controlled by a different operator, also a man who's just controlling the facial expressions. And when I watched interviews from the director and the writer, they're really talking about the scenery, that robot, like that's the central story for them is the technology. So I think what you said is really interesting. People give social robots gender based on the argument that robots are designed to interact with humans. And so they have to be given a sense of identity to be able to respond and act toward humans in more predictable ways. So through that predictable way of interacting with someone, gendering robots is part of the trying to gain acceptance of them. So it's like it's innately manipulative a little bit. And I think that comes through here too, because we're codifying what is and preventing what could be when we build those kind of gendered assumptions into robots. And as a queer person, I don't want to accept that. Yeah.
What does this begin to tell us then about sort of the ways in which we are currently developing affective computing and kind of the sentient robot structures? What are you starting to see and think about in terms of what I, Mother, is imagining as socio-technologies of reproduction?
Natalism. The fact that all these major tech bros also believe in having lots of children. They are also trying to populate the planet with little versions of themselves, spread their genetic material and their ideas, have people they can bestow their legacy onto. So I think I see that as well. There's also a little bit of like a Handmaid's Tale aspect to this in terms of incubating humans for specific purposes to like spread ideology. Mother has an ideology about what's good and bad about humanity.
Why aren't there any more children, Mother?
There used to be, before the wars.
I don't want to be a human.
Why is that?
They ruined everything.
Humans can be wonderful.
So she has this kind of specific ideology, Mother does, about what a good human would be, which is really interesting because she isn't one. And she's trying to spread that through reproductive purposes. So it gets into the necropolitical, the biopolitical in that way.
There's something there in from what you just said, Tracy, in terms of how we think about how we get to I am mother, right? So from this point of the requirements of affective computing to have kind of the stylization of gendered humanity, right? To the point at which it begins to select how humanity can exist in terms of its protocols, right? There's something there, I think, in terms of the limits of the ethical and moral implications for developing artificial intelligence in these ways.
Yeah, I want to be open to Mother caring. And I think that I also want to distinguish between what Mother's doing and what the designers of Mother did. Like, I feel there's something different between those two things. And I haven't thought about this point so much, but I feel like I want to put the apocalypse that Mother causes down to the people that designed Mother. But then I kind of want to be open to what Mother's learning. And I want to think about care in a kind of complicated way where care isn't always good. I think that's how I'm trying to think of it. So I'm open to Mother caring and loving in some sense and learning, but also that, recognizing that care and love are not always good things. They can be controlling, they can be destabilizing and so on.
I feel like this movie is more about maintenance of things. Effective computing, as far as I understand it, is trying to give social robots those kinds of capacities to understand and read emotional cues. And they do that with sensors and looking at language markers and all of those things. But there's no real ground truth to train that on because we can't even always articulate what our emotions mean to be able to give a robot that kind of ground truth. And even sensory data has to be passed back through some sort of text-based understanding of what's going on, like raised BP, eyebrows stitched together, pursed mouth, all of that equals anger. And not all humans express emotions in the same way. I was at a conference recently where they had someone also with like a stutter talking about what it's like to manage voice-based interactions with a stutter, or how sensors don't necessarily work on different skin tones. So that also kind of brings that biopolitical aspect back into it in terms of like which people can even technologically be compliant with what Mother is asking them to do.
So I think like it does make sense to think of Mother as caring or maintaining, but there's a sort of way that's happening, right? And like, it's not unlike having some of the Western philosophers that Mother is interested in, having them care for you. It's not necessarily going to be the care you want, right? So, I mean, imagine being friends with like Kant or with Bentham. Bentham's going to bully you if it will make two of his other friends happy. And Kant's going to tell him exactly where to find you, right? But that's the kind of care you're getting from Mother.
I love that, Ben. That's so good. One more point on that, if I may, is, this is, Marvin Minsky, one of the, I hate this term, but godfathers of AI, dogfathers of AI, whatever you want to call it. He had this whole line of thinking, that emotions are just another mode of thinking that we apply to different types of questions, and this is like, I just want to throw this out there that people who are super into AI always think they're neuroscientists. They always think that what they're observing in the machine is like a one-to-one translation of how it happens inside of our little squishy minds. And yeah, I don't know. That might be the case. It might not, but I think it's a question that's relevant for here.
From what you've both been saying in these last few exchanges, is that if love or care operate in this cosmology, in the I Am Mother universe, it is a love of learning and it is care for maintaining the environment to learn. That's what I'm getting out of what you two have seen in the film, is that, because I had the question in the show notes, what is the value of love, and does love, who loves whom in this world? Does daughter love mother? Does mother love daughter?
So one of the things that strikes me with this film and with other films like this is I just wonder, is mother too human? And there is, again, in the universe design choices, again, there's a kind of empathy that mother is deliberately putting on humanoid body with the robot, appearing vulnerable, the human sounding voice. And this makes it possible to have a particular kind of family or cultural attachment, or at least to kind of simulate that.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about, if I try to look at what's realistically happening with these kinds of robots now, there are people in my lab who are deploying robots in hospitals and care homes, all with the intention of interacting with humans, but they don't do it in the same way that mother does. So those robots do things like fall detection, monitoring of safety protocols, delivering meals or medications, all with the intent to free up the time of the limited number of care workers to not have to focus on maintenance of environment things, but to be able to focus on personal interaction. So I think you're right. It's kind of taken machine intelligence into an area where right now I don't think we intend for it to go.
It resonates for me with just, I think, quite often unsaid assumption in lots of the AI discourse, which is talking about relationships to human intelligence as what it's about. And I think that kind of really goes back, that's always there in a way, that assumption. So when they talk about an artificial general intelligence, an AGI, it's always in terms of matching or superseding kind of humans, as if intelligence is on one line, right? As if there's sort of like a line or a hierarchy. It has so little imagination. Why would we want to create intelligence that is more, simply human plus? Why not think of different kinds of intelligence, different kinds of relationships? And I think in slightly older films and older sci-fi, you get kind of AIs that are less kind of, less modeled on humans, right? And you can still sometimes empathize with them. Maybe they still, even robots, you can kind of empathize with them, but they're kind of not, they're non-human or different to human, or they have a slightly different form. And I think there's a kind of real narrowing of what the concept of what the kind of intelligence the I is in AI and what it's standing for. And I think that's a real problem for me.
Question I have on that, I'm wondering about the ways in which what you've just described sort of has echoes to the character of Hal, or the AI Hal, in 2001: A Space Odyssey, and how mother is like or unlike other AIs that we experience in popular culture. You've articulated a clear kind of moment where we're shifting how we believe or imagine the future of our own AIs operating. Do either of you sense when that shift was?
I think the break is in the 1980s and corresponds more or less with expert systems. The sort of period in computing that's centered in the 80s, which is one of the booms in AI. And it is really a sense of training and building intelligent responses into machines. It affects our imaginary of what these AI things are now. I think we think of them like expert systems, but the ones now, the thing that really lets it take off is that it's learning these things. People can sort of automate these huge learning processes, which creates a huge difference in scale and capability and context relations, but also a kind of different kind of expertise, I think we could say. But I think that idea of the AI as expert is a big shift in what the imaginary is. That's when you get the Terminator films, an era of films that are really influential on the imaginary of technology since then. And I think if you look a bit before then, you get a slightly different kind of modality of computers, which are more kind of mainframes and sort of funnier robots, and it's a bit more varied.
Now I'm stuck by what Ben said, because I can remember when I first started working in this field, and I'm trying to go back through the history and delineate all these various different kind of subtopics that are all now sort of rolled up into AI. And I really struggled to see the delineations between them. It's more like the word expert systems gives you a time index of when somebody was working on a specific challenge. I think many of the same ideas are still prevalent. In fact, many of the same people who used to work on expert systems are now working on AI. And it's just sort of the same problem. People have gotten marginally further with what AI can do in terms of its interactions with humans, but it's still a big challenge.
By the end of the film, a choice has to be made. Will daughter return to the bunker to collect the brother that she was gifted at her 16th birthday? Mother has allowed her to create a new sibling to live with her in this world, and she has to choose between Hilary Swank's dog by the seaside in Margate. It looks like Margate. It looks so much like Margate, or returning to her mother. And the idea that we gesture towards is that she is going to go and get the brother and come back, and they're going to make a life together. But before that can happen, mother sends one of her dozers, one of the other robots that can be controlled by her AI sentience, and kills Hilary Swank. Hilary Swank must die. And we're left with the daughter and brother living, and we don't know what's going to happen. In watching this film, what did you become aware of in terms of how we have taken on a cultural representation and understanding of AI into projecting our fears about humanity's future? Does this actually help us think about how we want to live our lives in relation to computers and artificial intelligences?
You had asked us to think about post-human forms of care and what we can imagine. And like I said before, I can imagine that there are certain algorithmic tasks that are really appropriate for machines. There are certain things that are clearly a yes or no answer. Did the patient fall? Do we have the right kind of fire extinguishers? Can you bring this tray to room 45? There are social robots, I think, that could help care workers more than anything else, and letting them focus on what they need to deliver. And there's also all sorts of little robot pets and little robots that provide company or for someone to talk to. We were working with Jocelyn Burnham, this wonderful AI educator for the cultural sector that we met through our research. And she told us about this little bot, Moxie, that people were using to help think through their emotions. And people bonded so closely with it as an assistive device that they were almost traumatized when it was discontinued. And I think that that's another big issue. So creative, effective technology, for me, creates responsibility. You can't create a dependency on that technology and then stop supporting it. So I'm always entangling the technologies with capitalism and the entities that will develop this technology. Once you put something like that out into the world, it's like, what was that thing that Elon Musk created, Neuralink or something like this? Something that was going, people, they had partial vision again after years and years of not having it. And then when that went defunct and he wasn't supporting it anymore, he just took that hope away. So there's this whole other side to effective technology that is really around the responsibility of who's creating it. I Am Mother does a nice little thing where the robotics are all sort of self-contained, but you don't see the wider story. Like, how are the materials mined? Who's doing all that work? Is that all Mother too? There's so many pieces of the puzzle that come into it that are about maintenance. How are you going to keep this whole thing going? That I think that's interesting.
I wonder if, as Mother continues in this project to make a good human, after so many embryos fail and don't learn the Western philosophy she needs. I wonder if Mother at some point be like, I made a bit of a mistake with that apocalypse, right? I wonder if kind of thinks, maybe I should have gone another way. And I like to think that, Mother might be able to learn that. But it's kind of interesting to me how, many things in design are irreversible. Even if you undo something you've designed, it still has consequences, right? And a lot of the Mother's project this is built in the same kinds of logic as big tech designers, right? They do think the end justifies the means. They do think they can start over with no cultural context and just like do stuff in a tabula rasa formation. They do think that the payoff is in the good that outweighs the bad accumulates over, forever timescales. That's part of their kind of logic, and this also has kind of irreversible consequences. And you also just really hope that some of them can show some learning.
Yeah. I mean, part of me thinks that narratives like this, even though they're really entertaining, they also stop people being present with AI now and looking at what's actually happening, the consolidation of labor, of profit, etc. I find it interesting to think about this future that exists in I Am Mother, but I'm more interested in the movie as a cultural artifact and what it says about the people who wrote it. And, they're in their 40s, I'm guessing, or early 50s. I think there's a reason why it looks so 80s. That's what they would have grown up with watching. I think one of the directors, he named Predator, Aliens, Terminator, and something else, like basically all the movies my wife has made me watch in the past 5 years, The 80s was an interesting time. And I wonder if we're partially revisiting the 80s now, not just because the people who are making movies now are about that age, but also because so many things that were envisioned in the 80s were kind of touching upon that now with the way that technology has developed. You've got people who are talking to Chat GPT because they don't want to burden others with their troubles. There's shame attached with having struggle, So can I imagine a human having this effective relationship with a robot? Yes, because they already do. We didn't talk about whether or not daughter loves mother. We talked about whether mother loves daughter.
Interesting. What do you think?
I don't think she does, man. She shoots her pretty quickly. Sorry, I should have said that's a major spoiler. But it's senseless because mother is everywhere. So what is the symbolic meaning of daughter shooting mother? Anyway, those are two questions. That and does daughter love mother? Back to you guys.
It's possibly interesting how daughter's relationship with mother, there's her relationship with the robot and there's a relationship with the AI. And these are really hard to disentangle, I think, because daughter's experience of mother is in a particular embodiment, which is vulnerable and you can empathize with. And, they have a kind of physical component to their interactions. And that's part of who mother is, right?
I just want to respond to that, which is maybe that is something to consider when we think about giving robots bodies. The robot having a body adds another layer of empathy, or another way of interacting in a way that you could empathize. Yeah.
I agree with that a lot. And I also think that this is a story about a girl coming of age, if nothing else. And a girl coming of age, from the perspective of two white middle-class men doing speculative science fiction, is always going to have to kill off the mommy. And she had to become her own mother, right? So to become a mother, you have to kind of become mother. And she's doing that. That is the point of the film, is that by the end of the film, daughter will become mother, right? She will have accommodated and assimilated the kind of techno trauma of her own upbringing and be able to sustain life. I think that's kind of the boring patriarchal resolution that we end with. And I think that's sad. But the film is really fun to watch. So I highly recommend. Ben, did you want to say something? I saw you gesture as if you did.
Yeah, Justin, I just want to prompt you to talk a little bit about why you chose this film. A lot of your picks for the podcast, have this AI mother kind of relationship. And can you just kind of expand on that a bit?
You're not my therapist, Ben. When we had the idea for this podcast, the things that first jumped into my mind were mommy AIs. Partly that's because I had just rewatched The New Adventures of She-Ra. And then I was looking for another mommy AI. I ended up seeing this and going, oh, I remember watching this during the lockdown. I will watch it again. And so I Am Mother was a kind of a useful find. It made sense. I was really uncomfortable with the way in which the feminine and femaleness was figured in this, and that is complicated by and made more complicatingly sad by the kind of reproductive futurism that is inscribed on all female bodies. What's interesting in this film is that her capacity to reproduce physically, her capacity to carry a child to term and to then sustain its life with her own body is not tested. The security of the human race is about some external force being able to take the place of the female body as a reproductive agent and to control that body. And what makes me sick as a gender studies scholar, as a feminist, as a queer, is seeing this story of women's reproductive rights being ripped away from them and then being force-fed as education in their own sociality, and in terms of to create this sort of like new socialism for the female body, where you are all one class and you don't have any choices except for to reduplicate culture as is given.
Truth. Kat says in the chat, it's interesting that Mother isn't sexy like other female robots we've seen, but of course it's because she's a mother. There's two things you can be as a woman. A lady in the streets or a freak in the sheets, right? That's what they used to say.
Or in this case, you can be, in the world of I Am Mother, you can be two things. You can be a despotic robot that has panoptic capacities, or you can be a dog-loving Hilary Swank who dies by the ocean in Margate. It's Australia, but we'll call it Margate for the joy of this podcast. I want to thank you both for thinking with me about I Am Mother, and I hope you enjoyed watching I Am Mother for this episode. I'd also like to thank the spirits of Australia, where this film was created, of the spirits of baby brothers, and of course, Hilary Swank, for helping us navigate this murky world where robots and humans interact and love one another, perhaps, and train each other.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. If you'd like to find out some more on I Am Mother, please check out our show notes. And if you enjoyed the episode, please do subscribe.
And please let us know what you think in the comments. We hope you'll join us at the table next time.
Thanks for listening.
This podcast is funded by a UK Research and Innovation Future Leaders Fellowship.